final few days before spring training games begin. This is the Phillies Talk podcast presented by Team Toyota. I'm Corey Seidman and he's Jim Salisbury. And Jim, the Phillies Grapefruit League opener is going to be Sunday afternoon, not televised. The first televised game will be the following day, Monday afternoon against the Tigers. That's the Phillies' first home spring training game. But on Sunday afternoon, Ivan Nova will be making his first start in a Phillies uniform in spring training. He's battling for the back end of the rotation. And there was a little bit of news this week in addition to that with Spencer Howard, Joe Girardi talking about Spencer Howard and the different potential roles that he could fill this season. I mean, what do you sense happening here with Spencer Howard? I mean, is he going to be in a battle with Nova and these guys for a spot in the rotation, or is it possible that he might not be in the Phillies rotation to start the season, whether that's the bullpen or AAA?
I think anything is possible. Yeah, I think it's quite possible that if they go with a hard and fast 5-man rotation, I think it's quite possible, maybe even probable, that he's not in it. So you have, Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, Zach Eflin at 1, 2, 3. They don't have a left-hander in the rotation, and they signed Matt Moore, a left-hander, to a guaranteed contract. I think he has a very good shot to be in that rotation. Chase Anderson was signed for back-end rotation depth to a guaranteed major league contract like Moore. I think that gives those two guys a leg up on the 4 and 5 spot. Now, is there going to be a 6th spot or a 5A in that they would, every other turn through the rotation add maybe a 6th man? Because we know all the complications with not having a long season last year and having a long season this year, and they want to watch innings and workload. They could go with maybe a 6th man, piggybacking him with Vince Velasquez, like Spencer Howard with Vince Velasquez. They could use Spencer Howard in the bullpen. They could keep him stretched out at AAA. I think everything is on the table. I think he's going to have a lot to say about the course of action with how he pitches and how healthy he is in spring training. That he's going to be on an innings limit for the season, but I don't know how they're going to work that. Maybe they keep his innings down by trying to use him in the rotation a little bit, in the bullpen a little bit before putting him in the rotation. It's just a lot of balls in the air. I think the bottom line is he wasn't healthy enough, nor did he pitch well enough last year for them to say, and rightfully so, for them to say he's going to be in our rotation. So he's going to be an important piece no matter how you slice it. They really need him to get better, and they really need him to build a workload and kind of realize that potential, because they need to grow some of their own pitchers. But I just don't know how it's all going to look on April 1, and it's probably a chance they don't even know yet. But for the 2021 season, I still think he's an important guy, and they need to get a contribution out of him in some way. And Ivan Nova is an important guy as well, because I know he's only on a minor league contract, but this is a team that needs pitching depth, and no team goes through a season with 5 starters. If you do, you usually win the World Series. So they're going to need that pitching depth, that starting pitching depth. I'm not sure how they would hang on to a guy like Ivan Nova, because he's really not a reliever if he doesn't make the team. But that's what they get paid the big bucks for to figure out. And he can make decisions awfully hard on people by pitching well. He can put heat on Anderson and Moore by pitching well. So he gets the ball right out of the gate, and he'll be an interesting story to watch in spring training.
Yeah, Nova, unless he just pitches terribly in spring training, if he does not make the Phillies roster, you'd figure that he would be in another team's plans for rotation depth. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that they could just slide through and get to AAA, given the need teams are going to have for starting pitching. This was an interesting quote from Spencer Howard earlier this week. He dealt with shoulder issues back-to-back summers, rotator cuff this past summer. He said that everybody saw the velo would go down during games, and it would take me a little bit longer to get warmed up. It wasn't as sharp of a pain like pinchy in my shoulder. It was more of like, oh, I don't have that much there anymore, which was more concerning to me, because it was like, well, am I just a bad pitcher now? Am I going to throw slow forever? Is this the new me? But getting away from last year and having some time off really helped, so I'm excited. Jim, you remember like when Spencer Howard was coming up and when he threw that no-hitter in the minor leagues, like he was billed as having a high 90s fastball. Then he arrived here in the majors last year, and he was mostly like 93, 94. And by the 3rd or 4th inning, by the second time through the lineup, it was closer to the low 90s. And I mean, the numbers bore that out too. Like the success hitters had against Spencer Howard the second time they faced him in the game, it was startling. that had to really impact him, the fact that he didn't have his good velocity last summer.
Absolutely. And he mentioned that he wasn't as aggressive with the fastball because when, if you don't feel good with it, you're not going to attack hitters with it. You're going to you have that uncertainty in your mind. And so much of this game, that the head leads the body. If one of your great weapons is not there, you start to second-guess yourself. And the minute you second-guess yourself on the pitcher's mound, these hitters, the best hitters in the world, they sense blood. There's blood in the water, and it becomes a feeding frenzy, and they just start hacking away, and you're in big trouble. So you have to take that mound with that sense of confidence and bravado. And if one of your weapons is not there, then that quality is missing. I used to have this conversation with Bob McClure a lot. I think he's one of the smartest baseball men I've ever been around, former Phillies pitching coach, pitched 22 years in the major leagues. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge there. But, he would always point out, except for the rare cases, the Greinke's who he had in Kansas City, it takes some time for a starting pitcher to believe he belongs. There is a growth process when you come to the major leagues, and you really believe, you belong there, and both physically and mentally. It just takes a little bit of time to really get comfortable and be in that good position where the head can lead the body. The head can lead all that physical talent. Early years and early starts in the major leagues are learning experiences for these guys. I think we've seen it with Zach Eflin over the years, how he's grown. And I think last year, if Spencer Howard looks at it the right way, I didn't think he pitched well at all. And he had health issues. I didn't think he attacked hitters. And there are reasons why, as we know now. But if he goes back and looks at that, almost 6 ERA, and what did he give up? 6 home runs in 24 innings, and had a lot of good swings against him. If he looks at it the right way as a learning experience, failure and not having success can be a tremendous teacher. And maybe that springboards into him into learning more about himself, learning more about what it takes to succeed at this level. Then last year can actually be a very, very good thing, because most pitchers, most ball players need time to make that adjustment to the big leaguers. There are some that hit the ground running and never look back, but there are others who need that time, and he looks like that type of a guy. So he needs to grow from that experience last year. It looks like he did. One of the things he said in that same quote, near that quote in that story, was that maybe it even wasn't his shoulder. Maybe maybe his body was out of balance. His delivery was messed up. It wasn't being maximized. He did a lot of PT this winter, worked on his hips, thinks his delivery is going to be better, thinks that's going to ease the burden on his shoulder and bring that good pop back that he had when he was in the minors, approaching triple digits, as you said. So I really think 2020 could be a good thing ultimately for Spencer Howard, but he's got to make it the good thing and really grow from it. And signs are that that he's progressing that way with the work he did this winter. Because as I wrote in that story you quoted from, so they got their rotation. Only in their rotation, only Aaron Nola is homegrown. They got they got Eflin in a trade for a homegrown player, Jimmy Rollins, and he spent time in their player development system. But, they didn't draft Eflin. They need to get to a point where they're, 3/5 of their starting rotation is homegrown, and they're getting those real good early years, 1 through 6. They're getting them in their uniform instead of moving them on in a trade because they need to bring in veteran pitching or they they can't afford to wait for these guys or whatever, because it's really expensive if you have to go out and sign your rotation every year. You can't sign a Zach Wheeler for $118 million every year. You got to develop some of your own guys. I mean, when the time is right, you trade for a Doc Halladay. When the time is right, you sign a Cliff Lee. When the time is right, you sign a Zach Wheeler. But you have to have more Aaron Nolas that you're drafting and bringing to the majors, and that they're your guys. If you want to build a sustainable rotation and a sustainable winning team.
Yeah, a couple teams that stick out in that regard right now, just in terms of having graduated homegrown pitchers to the majors and having them make an impact, are the Cleveland Indians and the Atlanta Braves. Like, those are just two teams that seem to always have waves of young pitching coming up. Look, if there's something for Spencer Howard to build on coming off last season, he did start games well. I mean, the first 2 innings of his 6 starts, he allowed 1 run combined in the first 2 innings of those 6 starts. The 3rd and the 4th inning is where the issues began. His opponents hit 167 the first time through the lineup compared to 412 after that. So big difference. And yeah, that velocity dip did hurt him as games went on.
Are you saying he's a future closer?
Well, when you look at that, last season, pitches 1 through 25, his opponents at 138 with 11 strikeouts, in 29 at-bats. Then you just look at it as he goes deeper, the numbers slip. But again, that's probably because he was throwing like 91, 92 by the 3rd, 4th inning.
And he wasn't letting it go. He didn't trust his shoulder. His shoulder was barking. Everything adds up. I mean, you need to try to develop this guy as a starting pitcher. If it doesn't work, you adjust, and maybe you have something in those early spurts in the bullpen. Certainly there's value there, big value, but I think there's more value in a young guy who's shown what he has shown in the minor leagues, trying to develop him as a starting pitcher, and I think that's what the focus when we look back at 2021, I think that's what the focus is going to be. He's going to have this opportunity to show that he can be a starting pitcher. I just don't know if it's April 1, May 1, June 1, but I feel like he's going to be important. And I feel like he's going to dictate his importance by showing how good he can be. And if he's good, they're going to find a place for him. They're not going to turn him away. If he's good, they're going to figure out a way to make the innings work and have him contribute in a way that works for everyone, for his workload, for the team's objectives, for everything. So he's a very, very remains a very important piece, and try to develop him as a starter. And if that doesn't work and you get way ahead of yourself, of ourselves, maybe then you make an alteration like the Arizona Diamondbacks once did with a guy named Archie Bradley. So, but for now, try to develop this kid's a real talent and try to get him contributing as a starter at some point in 2021.
Well, so, okay, the main theme of the Phillies 2020 season was that bad bullpen, but a kind of theme that we forget about toward the end of the season was just the barrage of injuries the Phillies had to key players. JT Realmuto's hip, Rhys Hoskins' elbow. There was also Bryce Harper's back. And Bryce Harper, speaking this week, talked about how much that back injury affected him last season, that he was having trouble even throwing. I guess it's possible that back injury did even more damage than we thought last season when Harper was in that kind of swoon the second half of the season.
Yeah, so often athletes never really let on how bad they're hurting. But he made a very telling comment on Thursday when he said he couldn't even throw anymore. It got to a point where he couldn't throw, and he had to go DH. So it was, he said it was soft tissue, and you're able to – he rested that first month of the offseason, didn't get right back on his program, and then got on his program and got on a good back program. Says he's healthy now, and he has to be. They need this guy, right? They need every piece in that lineup. But they really need Bryce Harper to be a great player for them. I mean, they're paying him like a superstar. They need him to be a superstar. He came here to win championships, and they'll have a better chance of winning a championship if he's finishing in the top 5 of the MVP voting every year, and that's what they need out of this guy. So, yeah, he was hurting more than he let on. Clearly, big dip in the numbers last year in that final weeks of the season where he was like second in the majors through 25 games in slugging percentage. And I think first in batting average. He was way up there, hitting like 340. And then in final 22 games of the season, again, it's a short season. It's hard to really frame it. But, second half of a short season, he wasn't even the top 100 of slugging percentage. So, because his back hurts. And it's hard to do anything when your back hurts. So, need Bryce Harper healthy. He's always hungry. He sounds really revved up about, playing in an organization led by Dave Dombrowski. He's happy to have his buddy Realmuto back. What else? He seems primed. I'm sure they'll go a little bit easy with him in camp and then try to turn him loose on April 1. And as we talked about, I think our last podcast, they got to figure out a way to – he doesn't need to play 162. They got to figure out a way to convince him that pulling back a little bit is going to, produce better overall results. And you need to convince him of that, get him off his feet now and then, and keep him healthy because he's big time important.
Sure is. And last season, Bryce Harper, despite playing through that back injury, he finished with more walks than strikeouts, led the majors with 49 walks, and it was by far the lowest strikeout rate of his career, 17.6%, almost 10% lower than it was the previous season. Thinking back to it, I don't remember Harper cutting down on his swing much or changing his approach much. He just struck out less last season. Does anything stick out to you in that regard?
I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but it seems to me when he did go through a bit of a tailspin when the strikeouts started to spike after about August 22nd. I think he peaked about August 22nd. Just got off to a great start. I think he was hitting 340, so obviously the strikeouts were down. And then he slipped and they went up a little bit. But he did, at one point, I think Joe Dillon, the hitting coach, talked to him about, less is more, which other hitting coaches have talked to him about. If you even think John Maley, the previous hitting coach, talked to him about it. When you've done it one way your whole life, it's tough to change at the big league. It's tough to change. But there are times when he does look like he's cut down a little on his swing, and he's still got the power to hit it 12 rows deep in the stands. But like I said, it's hard to change at this level. They just need to keep the guy healthy, and maybe with age, and with him being cognizant of his back, maybe the swing will calm down naturally a little bit and be a little less violent, and maybe ultimately that'll be a good thing as he transitions into the second half of his career. I don't know. So we'll keep our eyes on it.
Jim, you wrote this morning at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com about the relationship between Bryce Harper and Bryson Stott, the Phillies' first-round pick from 2019. Harper kind of taking him under his wing, similarly to what he did with Alec Bohm last summer. Kind of tell us a little bit about that relationship between Harper and Stott.
Well, they're both from Vegas. Harper played travel ball with Stott's older brother. And there's some family, even beyond that, there's some family ties. They're very good friends. They watch college football together. Stott, there's 5-year age difference. Bryce has been in the big leagues 10 years. Stott's trying to get to the big leagues. He's a good prospect, shortstop, left-handed hitter. Needs a little bit more time in the minor leagues. And it lines up with their middle infield, basically or ostensibly set through 2022 with Gregorius and Segura. I mean, there could be changes, who knows? But, that would line up with his development curve. He can play short and second. I think he's a better bat than he is a fielder. He was at the Auks camp last year, made pretty good strides. So I'm interested to see how he looks this year. He apparently swings the bat very, very well. I mean, Harper, who is a real student of the game, he compared him to Garrett Anderson. That was an awfully good hitter for the Anaheim Angels, and how he could power the ball. He could power the ball to the other field, to the opposite field, a lot of gappers and stuff. He's a good hitter. That's a nice comparison. Compared him defensively to J.J. Hardy and Brandon Crawford. Good. What's that?
Your boy, Brandon Crawford.
My boy. We got to get Brandon Crawford on the podcast one day. But so they're living together down in Clearwater, so that's not a bad roommate to have. I gotta imagine lobster tails and filet mignon every night. But no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, that's a nice guy to have as a mentor and a roommate in spring training. And Harper likes to mentor guys. Last year, he really took Bohm under his wing. There was a thing down in Clearwater last year, and I never wrote about it. And I wanted to write about it, but the world went crazy the next day, So there's a game down in Clearwater, and Bohm is batting. Grapefruit League game. And the home plate umpire is Tom. I want to say it was Tom Halligan, veteran umpire, good umpire, really good umpire. And Bohm obviously didn't like a ball strike call and kind of gave him this really sour look, kind of stepped out on him and, made it clear that he didn't really like the call. And the at-bat ended. I forgot how it ended, maybe a fly ball ground out, whatever. But Harper goes up to Bohm and sort of walks him, puts his arm around and walks him out to his position. And because it was the day before the pandemic hit and we all got sent home, it was one of those things you notice, but you say to yourself, well, I kind of like to write about that. I'd like to talk to those guys. That seems like what was going on there. To me, my interpretation was Harper was probably saying, hey, you might not have liked the call, and that happens in the game. Don't show up the guy. I thought it was a real veteran teaching moment. And I might have been wrong. It might have been nothing. He might have been saying, hey, you smell the cheeseburgers from the stands at the concession stand. I don't know, but I suspect it was a little word of wisdom about not showing up an umpire. I thought it was a great scene, and I never really got a chance to dig into it because our personal access has been cut off to the players because of the pandemic. And knowing ball players, neither one of them probably would remember it now. It's been, they've had a million at-bats since then, moved on. But I thought that was a pretty cool thing, and I think Bryce really likes to help young guys and mentor young guys. He's very much into the farm system because he's invested in it. He knows that these young guys are eventually going to come up and help him win ball games and get him to where he wants to go with his team, and that's win a championship. So he enjoys mentoring this kid, Stott. He enjoys, mentoring Bohm and others. And I think it's pretty cool, and it must be pretty cool to have Bryce Harper as your spring training roommate, flipping channels at night, watching Shark Tank, watching NBA, watching NHL, just some things you do at night.
Absolutely. Got to get those little wagers in, I guess. But hey, so Bryce Harper, his words, if that is the conversation he and Alec Boehm had when that happened last spring, Bryce Harper's words in that situation probably carry a little bit more weight because he arrived at the majors with this reputation of being this brash, cocky guy. I'm sure he had his run-ins with umpires in his early days. So if you're getting that kind of knowledge from him, probably means a little more just because he's kind of run the gamut. And now he's veteran Bryce, the guy who kind of tells the younger guys what to do and leads by example in that regard.
And how do you not listen? He's accomplished a lot in the game at a young age. All these young guys have watched him. And I guarantee you when Alec Boehm was at Wichita State and Bryson Stott was at UNLV, they wanted to be just like Bryce Harper. So if he points that out, I think it's a great thing. And I think it's what a veteran player should do. It's what Darren Dalton used to do. It's actually what Kurt Schilling used to do to pitch young pitchers in the rotation. He would mentor guys. Some guys would listen, some guys wouldn't. But, I think veterans have a lot to offer because, they've traveled the miles and they know what it's like to struggle, and they know how much better you can be if you emerge from those struggles. Baseball's a hard game. It's a hard game to be good at. That's why there's an attrition rate when guys hit 14, 15, 16 years old. They move on to another sport because it's so hard, and it can be very frustrating. So I think it's really great to have that support system in your own clubhouse. I know Girardi likes it. He talked about it, and Bryce is, like I said, totally invested in this organization, up and down. We saw it last year when he was politicking for Real Muto to get a contract extension. Some people might say, stay in your lane, but his lane is the Philadelphia Phillies, and he is, he wants to have a couple parades before he's finished here. And he's going to make a lot of different things his business. He even commented about how excited he was about the new front office and whatnot. And so, that was sort of the world according to Bryce.
Yeah, if you remember, like when we heard from JT Realmuto and Didi Gregorius recently, they both said that they were not worried this offseason, that they just had faith that things would come together and that they'd end up back here. And then Bryce Harper speaks Thursday, and he admitted that halfway through the offseason, given the slow pace of it, he was worried. And that then Dave Dombrowski came aboard, and it was like, wow, win now mode. I find it kind of funny that Bryce Harper's reaction to the Dave Dombrowski hire of, wow, maybe it's win now mode, is very similar to everybody else's reaction to the Dombrowski hire.
Yeah, I do think he made the distinction, though. He sounded like he wasn't all that worried about Real Muto because he said, I had faith all along that they would do the right thing because of our – before I signed, we had those conversations about their commitment to bringing in free agents. So he did say he believed they would do that, and he had faith that they would follow through on that. But he admitted to being worried about the direction of the team, which we all were. What are they going to do? And then all of a sudden, December 11th, they hired Dave Dombrowski, and he being the Las Vegas kid he is, it's like jackpot. He felt like he hit the jackpot. And I think I really think Dombrowski, I don't know this for a fact. I don't think anybody's really said it. And I'm not sure they would say it, but I really think Dombrowski convinced ownership to because the ownership was talking about pulling back on the payroll and because of lost revenues and retrenching a little bit. And I think Dombrowski came in and convinced them that you guys are a little bit closer to the playoffs than you actually think. You got a superstar right fielder. You got a great young third baseman. You got Rhys Hoskins at first base, who had a really good final month last year. You got, three really nice starting pitchers at the top. I think he kind of convinced them that, tweak here and a tweak there, especially in that bullpen back into the rotation, and maybe you're closer than you think to being playoff worthy. So I think all those things lined up, and if indeed that is the case, and Dombrowski had an influence on ownership opening up the wallet a little bit, then Bryce Harper's wow moment in early December when Dombrowski got hired was right on the money.
Well, if you've been listening to the Phillies Talk podcast all offseason, we've made it. No more Phillies Talk podcast for the foreseeable future here without games. Sunday is the Phillies' first Grapefruit League game. Monday, the first game that you can check out on NBC Sports Philadelphia Plus, 1:05 p.m. Phillies and the Orioles at the newly renamed Baycare Ballpark, formerly Spectrum Field, down in Clearwater. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Phillies Talk podcast. He's Jim. I'm Corey. Thanks for listening.